Correct. Who's doing them? Good job, Ireland. Good job, Jake. Justin's got all his done, I think. Good. Good. Keep circling those as you come in. All right. Well, as people come in, I'd like you to continue to go through here, circle the cells. There's plenty of options still left that haven't been circled, but we are circling our prophase cells in red, our metaphase cells in blue, our anaphase cells in green, and our telophase cells in black today. Okay, yesterday we used some Play-Doh. So if you have Play-Doh or slime or something of a similar consistency that you can use today, maybe you don't have any of that on hand, go grab a white piece of paper or a lined piece of paper and go ahead and get maybe crayons, colored pencils, markers. This is going to be a lesson that you can draw things and make great examples of. Got some fighting kids in the background. Sorry about that. All right, so we are going to go ahead today and move into meiosis. Meiosis. All right, yesterday we talked about mitosis. All right, mitosis. What is mitosis? What is mitosis? Somebody tell me, what is mitosis? Yes, the division of cells, the duplication of cells. Now, what do we know? How many cells do we start with in mitosis? We start with one cell, and how many do we end up with? Good. We start with one, we copy the DNA, and we end with two. All right, so we make one additional cell in mitosis. All right. What can you tell me about the two cells that we make in mitosis? What about these two cells that we make? Tell me about them. Tell me what those two cells. Now tell me about how they end. What do they look like when they end? Yes. Yes, Dustin. Yes, Pip. At the end of mitosis, those two cells, we don't just start with one and end with two, but we end with two that are genetically identical. Genetically identical, and that's super important. Okay? So mitosis is the division of cells. We start with one, we end with two, and they are two identical cells. All right. So, what form of reproduction happens in mitosis? Do cells reproduce sexually or asexually? What cells does this occur? our somatic cells, right? Animal cells, plant cells, animal and plant cells both have somatic cells. And yes, this is a form of asexual reproduction. And we talked about how asexual reproduction happens in very small, not mobile, okay, organisms. So we are mobile, which means that we can move around, right? Can our cells move around? Can our cells on our body move? Not very much. I mean, maybe in our bloodstream, but not like they can pick up and walk from my body to Milo's body and be like, I'm done with you, right? You are right, Justin. They are sessile. Sessile is the opposite of mobile, which means that they're limited in their mobility. All right. So today we are going to look at meiosis. All right, meiosis. It is spelled Meiosis. It looks a lot like mitosis. Well, I say meiosis. Some people will say meiosis, but I'm going to teach you to say meiosis, and I'm going to teach you to say meiosis very specifically because that me is how you were created. How you were created in meiosis. Or you were created because of meiosis. And meiosis is going to be the division of cells to create our sex cells, our reproductive cells. Okay. So today we are going to look at how mitosis, the division of our body cells, is different than meiosis, which are going to be the creation of our sex cells, our gametes, our gametes are our gametes, our egg cells and our sperm cells. All right, that is how they are created, is through the process of meiosis. Now let's look at this diagram for a minute. We looked at this yesterday. I think Justin was a step ahead of us in his reading and his preparation, but we started with one cell and got two identical cells. All right, so in human cells, we have 46 chromosomes. All right, 46. All right, so Pip has 46, Connor has 46, Justin has 46, Tabby and Kai and Faith and Adam and Ireland and Cody, they all have 46 chromosomes. So does Zion and Olivia and Kagi and Amari and Elizabeth and Riker and Zach and Josiah and Jenna. Every single person that is a human being, okay, has 46 chromosomes. And that's how we know that you're human. All right. Organisms often are identified by the number of chromosomes in their DNA. As humans, we have 46 chromosomes. And every single cell in our body, you can pull out a brain cell, you can pull out a liver cell, you can pull out a tongue cell, you can pull out a skin cell from your appendix or your spleen. They all will have 46 chromosomes. All right. The only cell in your body that will not have 46 chromosomes are your reproductive cells. Okay. And why would your reproductive cells only have 23 chromosomes? All right. I saw Pip in chat talking about diploid versus haploid, right? These are vocabulary words. Diploid cells just mean full. They have the full set of chromosomes. Okay. And I like to think of, just like we said, haploid, HA, haploid is half the number of chromosomes. All right. So our sex cells have half the number of chromosomes in them. Why would they have half? You say yes, because you're going to contribute half to your offspring. And then whoever will be the spouse of your offspring will also contribute 23 chromosomes. And those 23 plus 23 will give the offspring, right? A full set. What if we contributed 46 chromosomes to our offspring and our partner also contributed 46 chromosomes to our offspring? What do you think would happen? What do you think would happen? You're right, Zach. It wouldn't work, but why wouldn't it work? Anyone know? Why wouldn't it work? Zach's 100% right. Yes, but at the end of the day, you guys need, too many chromosomes is not good. All right. It's just like if I took 2 or 3 recipes out of my cookbook and pulled out all the ingredients for 2 or 3 recipes. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, I know I have the ingredients out for 2 or 3 recipes. I just need the ingredients for this one. Does that make sense? I wouldn't know how to sort it out. It would be too much. There we go. It would be too much information. So, too much information is not good. I didn't realize my webcam wasn't on. Too much information is not good. And too little information is not good. All right. And we'll start talking about that next unit in genetics. But when you have pieces of chromosomes missing or too many chromosomes present, it doesn't work. All right. We need all 46 chromosomes. We don't need more and we don't need less, or we start seeing some very big developmental problems. Does anyone know of any of those just off the top of their head? Anybody know? You know what? Autism is actually not it is an inherited it is an inherited thing, but is not um something that we can see in your DNA, if that makes sense. You're not missing any information. Yeah, it is inheritable. That means it does run in families. It is genetic, okay? However, it's not because you have too much or too little DNA or information, right? Yeah. Um I think you're right and wrong. I think it makes all of the special things about each of us make us all unique, right? I wouldn't say limited, Pip, because I feel like things for you are unlimited. Because I think that the way that you think outside the box and your creativity, all right, you also have some strengths that we don't have. All right. So I wouldn't say that it makes you limited. It's something that makes you special and unique.
Right. Just because you have something like me, like because I have autism, doesn't mean you're limited. You can do anything as you wish.
Absolutely. You can and that we're all created differently, and that gives us each, remember we talked about that yesterday. That gives us an identity that is unique to us and a strength that is unique to us. So I never want you to ever think that you're limited, Pip, because you definitely are not limited. You are 100% unlimited. There is a genetic disorder called trisomy 21. Has anyone heard of trisomy 21? So each one of our chromosomes are numbered. We have pairs. All right. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? Each one of those chromosomes, we have one chromosome from mom, one a chromosome from dad, and we have 23 pairs, giving us our full set of 46 chromosomes. All right. When we trisomy 21 is Down syndrome. Has anyone heard of Down syndrome? Heard of Down syndrome? Down syndrome is a our chromosomal abnormality in which someone has actually 3 chromosomes in their 21st pair. So instead of having 2 21st chromosomes, they actually have 3. All right, and that makes some confusion for the cells and for the body as they duplicate and try to find cell jobs and roles or whatever, right? Absolutely. And that does not limit them, right? That does give them some different capabilities. What is the cause of a child being born with both sets of sex organs? Nobody is born with both sets of sex organs. There are some gender abnormalities, but that again happens when you have maybe pieces of our gender determining chromosome. So we have one set of chromosomes that is our very last set of chromosomes, all right? Our 23rd pair is our gender determining chromosomes. And our gender determining chromosomes, there are 2 options, all right? Who knows what your chromosomes look like if you are biologically female? If you are biologically female, almost. Females are XX and biological males are XY. Okay. Now, because of chromosomal abnormalities, there are times when you only get pieces of those chromosomes, if that makes sense. So a piece of the chromosome can actually break off. All right. And then that creates sometimes things where hormonal balances might be different, or you might have some reproductive just things that are not I don't want to say normal, but that are typical of that gender. All right. So just like we talked about yesterday, the chromosomes. All right. My orange looks like a carrot today. But what happens is sometimes during the division process, during the meiosis process, one of these chromosomes will break and this piece will get lost. And so there are actual some genetic errors that happen because our chromosomes get broken, because maybe sometimes because an extra copy gets made. All right, there are errors in our cells and in our cell reproduction. In fact, what happens when we have a cell that just doesn't stop going through mitosis? So let's just pretend we talked about how it's like a pattern of the cell. What if every single day for one day I kept on doing the same thing? we talked about the cell cycle. It doesn't just always reproduce. What if I just kept brushing my teeth, washing my face, put my pajamas on, got down in bed, got back up, brushed my teeth, washed my face, put my pajamas, put another pair of pajamas on, and got back in bed? What if I just kept doing that same thing? What if a cell just kept going through cell division and didn't go through the rest of its cellular process? Yes, Dustin, you're on to something. That would be annoying, but that's how cancer happens. All right. That's when we get abnormal growths throughout our body. It's when our cell clock gets mixed up and they stay in that cellular growth area and they don't leave it. All right, we know some cancers are faster growing than others. But that is exactly what cancer is, the continual growth of a cell that is untimely. It doesn't turn off. All right. And you're right, our body and our body and cellular processes have a lot of editing techniques. All right. So, as much as you think that you see cancer as prevalent as it is, and as much as you see some of our genetic disorders as prevalent as they are, we would see a lot more if our bodies didn't have these editing processes. Our bodies actually catch a lot more of it than we think. Yep. I bet all of us have some kind of story with cancer. And you know that I lost my uncle earlier this year from a form of cancer that started in his brain. And then it traveled throughout his entire body, eventually filling his lungs with tumors. And it was the lung tumors that, eventually took his life. All right. And it is a sad part of life that, maybe we'll never understand.
You mind if I say something real quick on the mic?
Sure, real quick, go for it.
Yeah, so it's a bit personal, but like the 23rd of March was like a while ago, but that was when Natalie died of cancer. She was um she was the daughter of my granddad from Maryville, Virginia, and she's in a better place now, so send your prayers to her. And yeah, long story short, she died of cancer, but she was surrounded by family. So that's just an example. And to rest in peace to those who died from cancer. You will live on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that what Pip's saying about remembering people and remembering them with joy instead of remembering them in sadness, I think it is a sad situation, but I think people, I know that if I were here, I would want my daughters to have good memories of me and think of joy, even though we may miss those people. So moving on from that, unfortunately, that is a situation that has to do with mitosis and does hit home for a lot of us. And today we're just going to look at how do we get from a diploid cell, all right, with a normal amount of our DNA in it? How do we make our sperm cells? How do we make our egg cells? And females, did you know that your egg cells are already created on the very day you were born? You are no longer creating egg cells. Your egg cells were all made when you were in vitro, yes. Yep, your body is not just making reproductive cells all the time. Women are born with the eggs that they will have. All right. Oh man, I could just talk about this stuff forever because it's super interesting. There are actual chromosomal abnormalities that sometimes affect girls with age. And you can actually when I was going through our fertility experience with Ren, there were young ladies that had diagnosed fertility issues that were actually having their eggs removed as young young women and children because of some of the their body's genetic disorders that were turning off hormones and that wouldn't support that egg development, and they were retrieving those eggs so that later in their life when they wanted to have children that they would have protected eggs. So it is really cool what we can do with science. And it goes to say that just detecting and screening all of these things earlier really do give us the best chance of not just surviving things, but being able to thrive on some of those abnormalities that we might find that could be a challenge that don't have to be life challenges. All right, so when we look at meiosis, I want you to notice something. What do we look? The very first part of meiosis, what do you notice? Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. What do you notice about this? Yeah, these cells go through mitosis. So all the first part of meiosis is just mitosis. Okay? Now you notice this says germ cells in the gonads. Oh, let's freak out. This is going to be something that is always happening if you are a male. This is something that you are continually producing your gametes, your sex cells. Your cells will always be things that you are using energy to create. You have a lot larger number of cells, sex cells in your reproductive organs than we do as women in ours. Okay. So you are constantly replenishing that supply of sex cells. So the first part of meiosis is exactly the same. I mean, it starts again. Here's our Play-Doh. We start with prophase. All right, we break down that nuclear envelope. You can see those chunky little chromosomes floating around in there. In metaphase, they find their sister. They meet up. They staple together. In anaphase, what do? They pull apart to make those pigtails on each side. And in telophase cytokinesis, they actually pinch off to make two cells. So we start in meiosis 1, we make two cells just like mitosis. All right? Everybody feel good so far? Meiosis starts with round 1 of mitosis. So if we get mitosis, we feel good about meiosis 1 done. We've got this. All right. The next part is where it gets a tad trickier. All right. Tad trickier. Look what happens here. We get the same thing. All right. So now we don't have one cell in prophase. How many cells do we have in prophase here? We do the whole cycle again. All right. So now we have a cell with half the amount of chromosomes, or two cells, I mean, with the same amount of chromosomes. All right. We went from one cell to two clones. And now we're going to take those clones and we're going to divide them. So look, we go into prophase 1. We see the chromosomes getting thicker. We go to metaphase 2. They line up with their copy of information. That's the same, right? They line up. Now there's something different that happens right here in metaphase 2. Are you with me? Where does something different happen? Where does something different happen? What part of meiosis 2 does something different happen? Almost. Not prophase. Metaphase 2. Everybody type metaphase 2. This is super important. This is like a deal breaker if you don't understand it in biology. So if you have Play-Doh, slime, pictures, whatever, I want you to make 2 sister chromosomes. I want them to be different colors. Okay? So the sisters meet and they create that X. Watch what happens. In metaphase 2, yes, the original, I'm sorry, Dustin, the original cell is diploid. Yep. This cell is diploid. This cell is diploid. And then both of these down here are still diploid. Okay, because it's meiosis or mitosis the first time. So both of these cells are diploid. All right, we start with one diploid cell. After meiosis, we have 2 diploid cells. And then we go into that same division process again. When we get to metaphase 2, things get weird. Okay, look what happens. The sister chromatids do what we call crossing over. Watch what happens. This is crossing over. The chromosome ends switch. The chromosome ends switch. This is called crossing over. Crossing over. In crossing over, the pieces of the chromosomes exchange genetic information. So it would be like me being like, hey, Cody, can I give you my arm and you give me your arm? So that I'm a chromosome and I'm all normal except for my one Cody arm. All right? That's what's going on over here. The chromosome is all original except for a piece of it that has crossed over and exchanged genetic information with the other. And then the process goes on just as usual. In anaphase, they pull apart. And then in telophase, they divide. Now, you'll notice right here that you do not, between this diploid cell and the second prophase, we don't copy the information anymore. Okay? So we're taking the one chromosome from dad and the one chromosome from mom and we're pulling them apart. We're not saying when you copy it in mitosis, you have the 2 chromosomes from mom or the 1 chromosome from mom and 1 chromosome from dad and you've copied them. So you've still got one copy, whole copy for each cell. In meiosis 2, we divide and then we divide again. All right? So if you think about it in that regards, it's like you have one cell, one whole cell, and I'm not adding any more Play-Doh to this. So I'm cutting it in half, right? And then each of those cells are getting cut in half again. So that we end up at the end of meiosis. How many cells do we end up with? Yep. At the end of meiosis, we end up with 4 cells. And those 4 cells, are they clones? Are they genetically the same? Are they genetically the same? No. They are not genetically the same because they only have half of the amount of information. So they are getting some of your information that you've gotten from your mom or some of the information you've had from your dad. And it's not even all one or the other because of what? What was this process called? Because of, Yes, Faith. Because of crossing over. Everybody type crossing over. I want every single one of you, all 55 of you, to be typing crossing over. Because crossing over, this exchange of genetic information, is what helps provide the great variety that we get in each one of our identities. Okay? It's not a strategic exchange of information. All right, it's not like, "Ooh, hey, I really like blue eye color, so will you give me all your blue eye color genes?" No, it is a random exchange of genetic information between the chromosomes in your cells as they divide. All right? So that means that I'm not just getting one whole chromosome of information from my mom or my dad. That every single chromosome in metaphase goes through crossing over. So I'm not getting one piece of DNA that is just strictly mom or one that's just strictly dad. All right, even though you may see physical things that, like, oh yes, you definitely look more like your dad or you look more like your mom. All right, there are a lot of things if we could take off our outsides and look at the insides of us that might be differences. Like you might have your allergies that you get from one of your parents, or you might have like eczema because one of your parents had eczema, or all kinds of a variety of strange things that we get from our parents. Okay, but they're not all from one mom or one from dad. Ooh, Ellie, do you care if I share your question? Because it's a really good question. And that's my family too. So my sister has red hair. My sister has red hair. My mom has probably the same color that I have of hair. And my dad has really dark brown hair. Does not have, neither one of my parents have red hair. All right. So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means a couple of things. We talked about, remember, dominant versus recessive alleles, right? So red hair is probably a recessive allele. Yes, Riker, I'm going to do that. All right. Red hair might be a recessive allele, and that might be something that got hidden in the crossing over. My sister, we went back in my mom's lineage, and my great grandma's sister had red hair. My great grandma's sister had red hair. All right. So that means that somewhere in your DNA, that gene is in there. It's just been hidden for some generations. And then because of crossing over and because of this independent assortment, our independent assortment means our cells aren't choosy. It's all random how the DNA crosses over and how the DNA gets split up, right? That for generations at a time, traits can be hidden, right? And then all of a sudden that they can be exposed. And it's a really neat thing. Good. So what happens at the end of mitosis is we have 4 cells with 23 chromosomes that are our sex cells. That as females, this process happens as we are in utero. And males, this probably happens every single day in your reproductive organs. All right. So before we leave, as we leave, I want to finish this drawing. And this is a good drawing for you to do and take home, and a great note from today. In mitosis, we start with a diploid cell. What is our end results? like I 100% believe abilities can be your strengths of athleticism, of artistic abilities. I believe are all part of it. Yes. So we start with a diploid and we end with 2 diploid cells. Good. Can somebody write diploid in those? What happens in meiosis? The cells that made me. We start with 1 diploid cell and we end up with, yes, 4 haploid cells. Will somebody write haploid in these cells? All right, like I said, biology is getting harder. What we're going to be looking at next unit is actually, it's so much fun, but it is hard too. We're going to take these cells and look at these cells, and we're going to take a closer look at the DNA. All these questions that you're having today about genetic disorders and traits that relate back to our ancestry, that is everything we're going to do next unit. We're going to look at how our DNA, we can look about albinism 100%. It's not that we really are going to talk about that, right? We're going to look at all of, how what happens as our cells divide and the end, what happens with these cells, right? Well, we know they grow. We know they grow via mitosis. We looked at how in reproduction we take 2 haploid cells from meiosis, the egg cell and the sperm cell. We looked at earlier this week of how those combine. The DNA combines to give us another full chromosome set, how they form a zygote, and they divide and they divide and divide and become an embryo, and divide and divide and divide and become, a full-term baby. Yes, there is a quiz that is due. I think I have it due tomorrow, but it should be open today. All right. And then we have our unit test. All right. Unit test. So take some time today, go through this again. I'm telling you, make these flow charts. Make this in your own writing. This is going to help cement these processes in your little brains, okay? And we're going to finish up unit 3 and then head into our next unit, which is all about genetics, which is all about your genes. And it's going to be exciting. So it is 9:11, so I will not keep you a minute longer. If you have questions, stick around. Again, we have a quiz, we have a test. Make sure you do those before the end